My name is Johnie Hogland. I was born in Red River County, Avery, Texas in 1935. I was born, I often say, almost on the banks of the Red River. Might have been a little bit further than that, but certainly within a mile or so. And I went to school in what was called Henrietta, just a little community.
What grade did you get up to, Dad, in school?
Oh,
Graduated?
Yes, I graduated from high school. I have a 2-year degree, Associate of Arts.
How long did y'all live in Avery?
Probably, okay, World War II broke out. That's December the 7th, 1941.
December 7th,
We lived
1941.
In Red River County at the
A
time.
date which will live.
Shortly after the war broke out, my dad was a heavy equipment operator. I think his first job, paying job or formal job, was he helped build the Red River Arsenal that's near Texarkana, Texas. My dad was, he was John Hogland, and he like I say, after the war broke out, my dad started moving around a lot, and I think we lived, we went traveling then. The story about my dad's 41 Ford was that he had a 42 Ford on order, brand new. But when the war broke out, the military got all the vehicles, but he did manage to get a leftover 41. And this 42 went to the military. And we started traveling around then from job to job. I was trying to remember where it was we went. I remember there's one place in Texas, but I can't recall the name of it right now. We lived there and worked there a while. Then being so close to Oklahoma, we went over into Oklahoma then and started working. And I always said, me and Reba, we went to school together, which wasn't quite true. That was in Kiowa, Oklahoma, which I understand she came from. Of course, she is younger and all that, but we probably might have gone to the same school. Just years apart. Then I remember one thing about Kiowa, Oklahoma. I remember one time the pharmacy caught on fire. They had a nice building there and everything, and I don't know what kind of chemicals they had in there, but it was shooting fireworks from that pharmacy. And
so y'all stayed in Oklahoma a while, and
from there we went to California.
Okay.
From Kiowa. Our first trip, and I never knew for sure, but I always thought my dad was sort of running from my mother. He was gone for a little while, and we took off to California. He was already out there. And at a place called Hemet, California.
Do you know how long y'all lived there?
Not very long, just a short time, and then we came back to, when we came back to Oklahoma, there again my dad was, I assume he was running, but when we went back to Oklahoma, we went to Oklahoma City, and my mother went to work in the airplane factory at Tinkerfield, Oklahoma. And we lived with my great aunt. And actually, I have, when Eddie moved up there, he took me for a ride around, and I think maybe we managed to find the street we lived on, because it was Santa Fe Street, right by the railroad tracks. Of course, that was so many years, it was nothing recognizable, really.
So then your mother worked there during the war?
Yeah. She used to say she could build an airplane.
She could build an airplane?
Because she worked on an assembly line.
Well, tell us your mother's name.
My mother's name was Bessie Edith, I think.
Bessie Edith.
Yeah, that's where Nancy came.
That's where Nancy got her name. Do you remember what year that Grandma would have been born?
I want to say about 1917.
Was your dad older
Or
than her?
my dad was a little older than her. That might have been his birthday. But somewhere along in there.
Okay. Do you know about what age you were when your parents split up? Do you remember?
No, not specifically. Probably about 8 or 9.
Is that when y'all were living in Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what year that you guys ended up coming to Houston?
No, because we made another trip to California. My mother took off up there, and I was living with her in Oklahoma City. Then we went to California to Long Beach. Well, no, actually to Los Angeles. And one time we went off to, lived in Long Beach for a while and commuted. And they had a rail to like streetcar.
Okay, so they had, that's how y'all got
Yeah,
around.
Long Beach was so close to Los Angeles.
Okay, so they had like streetcars.
Yeah.
Didn't have vehicles. Was that
Yeah.
in the late 40s?
That was, yes, pretty late 40s. When we finally came back from Los Angeles, well, I wanted to, my dad in the meantime had got shot in the leg, and he was laid up healing, and he stayed with his brother, Bill Hogland, William Finus Hogland actually, and so he laid up there when Mother and I came, and he had already married, I guess,
Right.
Stella, but he was laid up there in bed with that cast on his leg, and it wasn't healing. And finally, I understand he just cut that cast off, and he had a pretty good limp for a while because it left his leg shorter.
Was he a peace officer at that time, Dad, when he got shot?
Yeah, okay, that's the part I don't know. I don't know if he is a peace officer or if he is at the joint, so to speak.
Okay. But he did become a police officer.
But he
later on.
did later on become a police officer.
And then he had children with Stella.
Yeah, I had 2 sisters and a brother. Anyway, when we came back from California and he was laid up, I wanted to stay with him. I don't know why, just kid thing. I hadn't been around him. So my mother settled in Houston. And and the other Hoglands that moved away happened to go to West Texas, to Andrews.
And so when you stopped living with your dad, you moved to Houston
Yes.
to live with your mother.
Yes. I do remember my first day in school because going to it was a country school, wooden frame, two room school. And that first day of school, my cousin Maydeen she was a few years older, and she was in the so-called high school part, and of course I would have been in the elementary, but when they lined up to go in, I got over in the line with her.
When did you graduate high school? In what?
1952. Was it 2 or 3?
But what high school did you go to?
Aldine Senior High School.
So graduated from Aldine Senior High.
Yes. And at that time, the graduating class was pretty big. It was, I think, somewhere around 60 students. Today, they have several high schools, and they graduate about 500 or plus every year.
Yeah, so that's about 50 years then.
Yes.
Or almost 60 years. Such a change. Well, this is 2014, and if you graduated in 53 or so, that's about 60 years.
It was 52, I guess I graduated in. Yeah.
So a lot of changes from that time.
Yes.
Do you remember your first job that you had when you got out of high school?
Okay, the first paying or salary job, I guess you could say, is I went to work for the North Houston Pharmacy as a delivery boy. And back in those days, the pharmacies that they would deliver your prescription. It might be a $2 or $3 prescription, but I'd take off on a little run, maybe have a half a dozen or a dozen prescriptions, and I'd deliver them around the area. I had a little Willys Jeep that I used for that. Then a little later on, we got a 50s, I guess about a 50 or 51 Ford pickup. And,
Do you remember how long you worked for them?
Several years. I couldn't say offhand how many, but at least 2 or 3 years. My first car I bought when I was working for the pharmacy in Stillings High School was a 1939 Oldsmobile convertible. And then I went from that to a 1947 Ford automobile, and then to a 1953 Ford.
And when you So what was your second job that you had once you got out of the pharmacy?
I worked, okay, a lady that worked with me, she started on the hush-hush. Her husband was a superintendent, a construction superintendent, and he hired me to as a helper, carpenter's helper, and we at that time built at least a portion of it or something, the Dow chemical plant, or not the plant, but the office building.
Okay.
And I did that for a few months, and when the job finished, I just never did go back to it. Jumped around then, a little here and there.
Okay, Dad, we were kind of talking about where you worked when you worked with the carpentry work, and so tell us where you were working when you met Mimo.
Okay, I met Grandma. I was working at Harper's Pharmacy then. Now Harper's was kinfolks to them,
Okay.
and I had sort of jumped from job to job. Nothing. I was a painter's helper with Pete Bengowski or something for a little while, and that job finished. I just went on, and I had finally gone back to Harper's Pharmacy.
Okay. All right, so that's where you were working at Harper's Pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the night that, so you already knew Mimo, but you hadn't dated her, but so tell us about the night that you, I guess you went on your first date with her.
Well, we met at Prince's Drive-In Theater on Jensen Drive, and some of us sort of paired off, and we drove out to San Jacinto River and parked out on the sand.
Yeah?
What year was this?
That would have been about 50, what? It would have been 53, because I had my 53 Ford then. Yeah.
All right, so you had a 53 Ford then. You didn't have the pickup truck then, you had the...
No.
Okay, so you had a 53
And the
Ford.
pickup truck we talked about was my pharmacy's pickup.
Okay.
I didn't have to furnish my own.
So they had their own.
Yeah.
All right, so how long did you date Mimo before you, or do you remember, did you remember how you asked her to marry you or anything like that?
Mm.
Or was it just an assumption you knew you was going to?
We knew it was coming. I told her, I was making notes on the car, and we decided that when I got the car paid for, then I'd ask her to marry me. And I did, right in front of Gaydale's place there in Spring.